There's one recipe in this cookbook that I knew immediately I would never make. And that's not true. There's actually a couple. But they all have one thing in common. Gelatin. Now, I've cooked my way through this cookbook and I've kept a pretty open mind, I feel. I've made soup, cake, made the casseroles, and I've asked a lot of questions, and I kept cooking. But there's a line. And for me, soup suspended in gelatin is that line. This book gives us, let's see here, there was quite a few of these. Not that one. All right, this book gives us Creamy Tuna Mold, Rosy and White Aspic, but not to be outdone by the double-decker chicken salad mold. And every single one of these recipes expects me to suspend meat, cottage cheese, and the vegetables in a savory gelatin mold, and then serve it cold. I want you to really look at this with me. These are not warm, these are not comforting. There's something deeply unsettling about meat and cottage cheese being suspended in time, preserved, and waiting. And as much as I love vintage books, I simply am not brave enough for this. But before we judge these recipes too harshly, we have to ask the bigger question. How did gelatin end up in these recipes in the first place? Gelatin was actually a luxury food, and back in the Victorian era, it meant boiling bones for hours, sometimes days, until the collagen released from the bones and clarified. If you served a clear aspic, it meant that you had resources, time, and help. Clear gelatin wasn't a casual food. It was a way of displaying skill. And when powdered gelatin became available in the 1800s, gelatin became something that was available to everybody, no longer just the wealthy. It suddenly became available to the average home cook. And once gelatin became easily accessible, people started experimenting. By the 1950s, gelatin wasn't strange. It was modern. Gelatin dishes fit perfectly into the post-war kitchen. Refrigerators were becoming standard, meal prep mattered, and presentation and hosting were important. These molds were served at ladies' luncheons, church gatherings, bridge clubs, and then, holiday buffets. Cold food wasn't considered unappetizing. It was considered controlled and impressive. And from Campbell's perspective, gelatin just made sense. Their soup already had salt, fat, flavor, and structure, and then by adding gelatin, their soups now became moldable, sliceable, and visually dramatic. These weren't comfort foods. These were centerpieces. And guess what? Gelatin wasn't just happening in average homes. It was happening at the White House. Eleanor Roosevelt was known for her practical, no-nonsense meals, and gelatin fit right into her value for efficiency and nutrition. Mammy Eisenhower openly loved gelatin and served them at the state banquets. These dishes weren't considered strange. They were fashionable. So when Campbell's added gelatin to their cookbook, they weren't being outrageous. They were being current. But here's where the past cooks and present-day me part ways. I can be curious, I can be nostalgic, I can even be brave, but I cannot emotionally prepare myself for suspended chicken and cottage cheese and vegetables just suspended in gelatin. And then especially knowing that this is supposed to be sliced and served like cake. I'm simply just not that strong. But honestly, these recipes are still important. They're important because I won't make them. It shows us how much presentation mattered, how different convenience used to look, and how dramatically different our ideas of comfort foods have changed. These gelatin dishes tell us more about the era than the successful recipes do. Somewhere along the way, our priorities shifted. We started valuing warmth, texture, and strength. Refrigerators stopped being impressive, convenience foods evolved, and gelatin lost its status as a show-off ingredient. What was once futuristic is now unsettling. And not because people were wrong, but simply because food culture moved on. Cooking through this cookbook has felt like stepping through somebody else's kitchen. Some of the recipes surprised me, and some of the other recipes still have a place in a modern home. And some, like the gelatin molds, are exactly where they need to be. Preserved, observed, and never recreated. Thanks for going through this cookbook with me. Until next time, keep your pans hot, your knives sharp, and I'll see you in the kitchen.